The podcast is here! And since you can't see us, we'll tell you who we are. First and foremost, my name is Ed Burkeen. You can find me on RealSport101.com as a featured wrestling writer. I also cover a little bit of baseball and a little bit of hockey. With me, as always, is the muscle of the podcast, future MMA fighter, and hopefully voice of the Philippines, the one, the only, the Jaime. Say hi to the people, Jaime.
What's up, wrestling fans? The original greatest man that ever lived is back in the podcast, so let's go!
Alright, before we get started, a little something to tell everybody today. This podcast will be in two parts due to scheduling reasons. As you guys know, it's a little late to get on the web this week due to some work scheduling conflicts. We're going to have Jaime for the first half to talk about all the wrestling action that happened this week, and then on the second half, it'll be the showdown between me and the real Danny D, as he will try to convert me into watching indie wrestling. News tip for you, not gonna happen. Anyway, let's kick off the show, and Jaime, what a week it has been. We start with Monday Night Raw. What were your takeaways from Monday night?
I actually liked the main event, you see. I know, Ed, how much you hate the indies, but whenever you see two indie guys do indie things on a WWE level, it's, fireworks for the fans. Like, this is awesome chance. But when you add the homegrown like The Miz, who is able to hang around with these two indie guys, with these two more risky superstars, you get an awesome match.
Exactly, and if I had anything to take away from Raw, it would be the fact that you could have literally watched the last 45 minutes of the show, missed the first 2.25 hours, and been perfectly okay. The thing that you wanted to see was the main event, because not only did you see Finn Balor, Seth Rollins, and The Miz in the same ring, but we saw run-ins by Samoa Joe.
Yeah, and speaking of that, Ed, we already know that The Miz has a bone to pick with Dean Ambrose, so there's going to be an eventual title match between the two. And we know that Seth Rollins isn't done with Samoa Joe, and eventually Finn Balor and Bray Wyatt are going to face each other. But what made that triple threat match good was that you never really knew who was going to win on the onset. Everyone had an equal chance, even The Miz,
That is a good point. But the thing that I'm more worried about is you saw all three of the guys in the main event go into their feuds. Miz and Dean Ambrose, they're going to keep going. Seth Rollins and Joe, they're in one. Finn and Bray Wyatt, they're in one. Now we got Brock Lesnar coming back. Which one of those feuds, and I'm pretty sure it's not going to be Miz and Ambrose, is going to get elevated to have Brock Lesnar added to it, so we see the title switch hands, because I don't see Lesnar having it past SummerSlam. So are we going to see somebody new, maybe a Roman Reigns, although it looks like him and Strowman are still together? Who is going to be elevated to challenge Brock Lesnar when he comes back?
I think it's going to be another David versus Goliath story, Give Seth Rollins another big guy to face, I really see him getting over Samoa Joe with that feud. So I think he's the one who's going to most likely get Brock Lesnar among all of these names you've mentioned.
Well, if you look at it, the smallest guy is the face in all three of those matchups. I mean, Dean Ambrose and The Miz, it's kind of a push. I think Miz may be a little bit bigger, but Finn is dwarfed by Bray. Rollins is dwarfed by Joe. And even if you look at Roman Reigns, Reigns is dwarfed, and that's saying something, by Braun Strowman. Lesnar is going to, with the exception of maybe Strowman, is the biggest guy that's going to be in any one of those feuds. So anything you have is going to be a David and Goliath matchup. Now let's move on for the sake of tradition, I guess. We saw actually two cruiserweight matches. Austin Aries defeated TJ Perkins, who I read online will now be referred to as TJP. And then we had Jack Gallagher, Rich Swann, and Akira Tozawa defeat the Brian Kendrick, Tony Nese, and Noam Dar in a 6-man cruiserweight match. Now, we know 205 Live is not doing well, mainly because it's a exclusive WWE Network product, and it is aired after SmackDown on a Tuesday night. Not a big night for TV watching, not a big night for internet watching. And it's also filmed after SmackDown, which means everybody's already had the crescendo of one of the main shows and nobody's really paying attention to some 150-pound guys flying around the ring. Are we going to be seeing more cruiserweights featured on Raw? Or is this something they're just trying one last desperate gasp before we may see them go away?
Definitely, we're going to see more cruiserweight action in Raw because they brought back the cruiserweight division to bring back how Raw and SmackDown was back in like 2003. Am I right? So
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more of them on Raw, even though 205 Live might eventually fall out.
There's a few things that don't make sense with the 205 Live roster. Now, you would think it being 205, everybody under 205 would be eligible for the Big Purple Championship. However, you have a guy like Kalisto, a Sin Cara, and then is Finn Balor over 205? It's got to be pretty close. Is a guy like, I know Seth has got some height to him, but he's got to be pretty close. Dean's got to be pretty close. None of these guys are exactly, 240, 250 sitting in the ring. So are we going to see maybe a bigger name go to 205 Live or go to compete for the Cruiserweight Championship, given that that division is kind of floundering right now outside of Austin Aries, TJ Perkins, and Neville?
Well, definitely, yeah. We might see, remember when they brought the Hurricane Gregory Helms just to, add a little bigger name to the dying division back then? So they might do that with one of the superstars. Let's say Sami Zayn might just lose a little more pounds before or he finally transitions to 205. But given that he's on SmackDown Live, so we don't see that happening in the near future, maybe next year or I don't know when.
Now, hold on a second. Did you just break news? Are you sitting here while sitting in the Philippines and telling me that the secret alias of the Hurricane is none other than Gregory Shane Helms? Is that what you're telling me?
I guess so. I hope so. I guess so.
Folks, you heard it here first. The Caps Locks and Chair Shots podcast with breaking news. Gregory Shane Helms is the Hurricane. You can take it to the bank. Write this down. Spread it all over the world. Gregory Shane Helms is the Hurricane. That has been confirmed. Now, let's move on to SmackDown Live. The thing that stuck out to me on SmackDown Live was perhaps one of the greatest segments I have ever seen, and that was Tyler Breeze and Fandango. They got this thing going on where they are, what do you call them, the Fashion Police? Is that what they are?
Fashion Police.
And the exchange made my recaps lines of the week where they were talking about their next big boss, the Usos. Fandango, they're walking around backstage like they own the place. Tyler Breeze, that's jaywalking. And that's Jimmy walking. Couldn't have laughed any harder. The fact they're ripping off Law & Order, which is predominantly featured on USA, along with Law & Order SVU, I thought was freaking outstanding. What was your big takeaway from SmackDown Live?
Well, since you already mentioned the Fashion Police, you know what they remind me of? Remember when Edge and Christian broke out of the Brood when they separated from Gangrel and they had this goofy gimmick of flash photography?
Oh, the 5-second pose for flash photography. Blowing the kazoos and the big hats, and yeah.
Yeah, I think the Fashion Police is like the second coming for that. That goofy gimmick that just got over.
Well, Fandango has made pretty much his entire career of being a goofy gimmick that got way more over than what it should have been. I mean, when he was the ballroom dancer with whatever woman he was with, people were singing his entrance music, and then Tyler Breeze is cut from the same mold. This is a match made in heaven for them, and I couldn't agree more. I think they're going to really go places given the chance. They're both solid workers. Maybe Breeze goes down to 205 Live after they split up. Maybe he gets put in that cruiserweight division. But what else did you see from SmackDown?
Is it true that the Aiden English segment where he was crying was a rip Mauro Ranallo?
I've heard rumors. It's a very Vince McMahon thing to do, to bring light of something like that. I thought it fell as flat as anything that I have ever seen. Nobody really cares about Cesaro's American brother crying like that. He literally looks like Cesaro that has been depressed for 5 years and hasn't found the gym. I thought it was just terrible. That's all me. And if it is ripping on Morrow, then, good job, Vince. Way to be the biggest a-hole in wrestling again. Let's talk about Dolph Ziggler for a second. I have been so high on Ziggler for many years since he started. I thought he should have gotten more runs with at least the world title. Because of him, we got a good AJ Lee. Because of him, we got, Big E Langston. So we wouldn't have had the great female wrestling we had a couple of years ago. We wouldn't have the New Day at all if it wasn't for for Dolph Ziggler, and he gave us some of the most cringeworthy segments with him getting married to Vicky Guerrero. What's your opinion on the show stealer?
Right now, to be honest, Dolph Ziggler is starting to get boring because as the time came by, when his roles had eventually matured, it didn't just get along with the fans, unlike when he was that young, cocky show-off.
Right. I hope to see him back. I think he's way better heel than anything else, and maybe he can get a push somewhere, but the way everything's going, it seems like he's going to be very much a JBL type character where he's just going to be stuck in the mid-card for a long time, maybe get a few tag team runs, but he's just going to be stuck in that mid-card till the end of his career where they give him a token championship run. Maybe think more like Mark Henry, something like that. Now, we did see two titles change hands on SmackDown. One happened at the beginning of the show with Shane taking the title from Jinder Mahal and giving it back to Randy Orton. And then we saw Jinder absolutely destroy Sami Zayn in a match that was botch-worthy, to say the least. Let's start there. Sami looked off, did he not? Am I wrong in saying that Sami looked about a half a second off there?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and then, you had Jinder come out with, I guess they're now repackaged as the Singh brothers, the Bollywood boys. Almost mercifully that match ended. I don't know if it helped. I mean, it obviously hurt Sami Zayn, but I don't know if it helped Jinder at all. What do you think? Was that something that was worthy of that spot right there? Or should that have changed?
Sami Zayn is starting to become sort of the glorified jobber or the gatekeeper. He was put over Kevin Owens just to get over it and give Kevin Owens the better spotlight. So I think that's what they're trying to do with Sami Zayn, because how many times has he lost on such a golden opportunity? You see, he lost the triple threat match with AJ Styles and Baron Corbin in it, and now he's losing to Jinder Mahal.
I mean, he's losing, but at least he's losing to big name guys. It's not like he's going out there and losing to Heath Slater. It's not like he's going out there and losing to Titus O'Neil or Goldust, if you will. I mean, he's losing, but at least he's still in that spotlight working with the big stars. I'm not sure that he was the right person to put Jinder over, especially to be the first match on the card on SmackDown. Let's go to the other title that changed hands, and that was Kevin Owens ending the 48-hour reign of Chris Jericho winning back his United States Championship. The beatdown sent Chris Jericho away for a long time. What were your thoughts? Where do they go with Kevin Owens from here?
Well, eventually he's going to feud with AJ Styles, which is definitely going to be money both in the mic and in the ring. But as for Chris Jericho, how does he come back from this? Like, he already got beaten up in the Festival of Friendship. He came back and feuded with Owens. But what happens when he comes back the next time around after this Posy tour or stuff that he's up to?
Well, if you look at every time Jericho has left, he's come back like as if nothing has ever happened. Every time he leaves to go tour with Fozzy or has another book coming out and he's going to do the signings and everything else, he gets the tar beaten out of him. And 6 months later, somewhere around the Royal Rumble, he comes back like it never happened. And just, hey, that's over, it's done with, book closed, let's open up another one. And now he's feuding with, maybe even Sami Zayn would be a good feud for Jericho if he comes back at all. Maybe he gets a big name. Maybe he gets John Cena and Cena can retire him. Maybe he retires Cena. Maybe they both retire and it's a glorious thing for the internet to cry and weep over, so we never have to see the two again, both in the good and the bad, and that's coming from a John Cena fan. As for where Kevin Owens goes from here, my only question is, he's a heel. AJ's being booked as a heel. He's being cheered as a face, but he's being booked as a heel. So now we got two heels. Who turns? Obviously it's going to be AJ, correct? AJ's going to be the one that goes back to the good side?
Yeah, definitely. Kevin Owens is just so over as a heel. Like, AJ can play the face or play the heel, but I think Kevin Owens never really played the baby face like in such a long time that it's going to take some time to build him up as a baby face. So I guess that's AJ's going to turn face.
Well, I think it's going to be a lot easier to turn AJ than it is to turn Kev. I mean, turning AJ is going to be something ridiculously simple. Kevin Owens comes out, beats the hell out of him. AJ cuts one promo and everybody's in love with him again. With Owens, as much stuff as he has said and done and everything else, I have no idea how they go from here if they want to make Kevin Owens a good guy.
I agree.
there is one thing we have to discuss on SmackDown. It's a horse that I have been beating for about a month now, and it should be dead, and if not, I'm not doing it justice. And I wrote an article about it. I mentioned last week's show about how Total Divas is killing women's wrestling in general. And I don't think that was ever more apparent than on SmackDown last Tuesday, where we had, I guess they're calling themselves the Welcoming Committee now, with Tamina, James Ellsworth, Natalya, and Carmella, as they took on Charlotte and Naomi. You can't argue with the booking. It was solid. But, and I'm going to say it again, Natalya went from being one of the best female workers in the entire industry. Somebody that has, it's in her blood. She has the training, the pedigree. You know, her husband is one of the greatest, best workers in wrestling right now. She went from being that and somebody that the fans ridiculously respected to a high school bully that's ticked off because Charlotte's getting an opportunity that Natalya has blown on more than one occasion. Carmella is a hanger-on. Tamina needed this so she can seem like she has some semblance of a personality. But the best thing about the Welcoming Committee is probably James Ellsworth. So that should tell you right there what I think about that Welcoming Committee. What are your thoughts on those four pieces of talent?
Well, the Welcoming Committee is kind of a good thing given that they're kind of initiating Charlotte. But as you have mentioned, Total Divas is definitely killing that kayfabe. Like, let's say, Natalya's portrayed as such a very nice lady in real life in Total Divas in reality show, but she's the exact opposite on TV. But we also have to consider that Total Divas, the episodes aired on Total Divas are taped like months prior, let's say 4 to 6 months prior. I don't really know because there's sort of a discrepancy between the airing of Total Divas and the storylines.
I don't know. I just think it's one of the worst things going right now for all of the work they put into the women's revolution and reintroducing a new women's belt and everything else to now where we're at. For one, I think they're wasting Charlotte. They're wasting Naomi. Well, I don't want to say they're wasting Sasha and Bayley because I was never really sold on them in the first place, but Becky Lynch is another one that I think, you know, she had a prominent spot coming out and saving Charlotte and Naomi, but even then, I think it's all a waste, and they could be doing something a lot more interesting and a lot better. Speaking of a lot more interesting and a lot better, that brings us to Thursday night and Impact Wrestling. Impact Wrestling had perhaps the match of the year wrestling-wide when Matt Sydal, I know him as Evan Bourne, you guys know him as Matt Sydal, and I found out he actually grew up less than 45 minutes from where I grew up at the exact same time. He took on none other than Eddie Edwards. If you haven't seen this match, go to the Impact Wrestling website. Go to YouTube. Find it somewhere and watch it. It was hands down the best match I have seen all year. I'm tired of gushing about it. What did you think?
I also think that was the best match of the night. It was awesome because we already know how Matt Sydal works back. If you have watched clips, I know you do not watch New Japan regularly, but if you've just seen clips, especially when he killed it with King Ricochet, and back when he was Evan Bourne in the WWE, he was already that gravity-defying superstar. And you have Eddie Edwards, who's also a decent worker, a daredevil of his own, and, you know, you're really in for a good show. And to tell you quite honestly, with the return, with Matt Sydal coming to Impact and Loki becoming the champion, that makes other X-Division guys like, let's say, your DJ Z's or your Braxton Sutters, makes them look like amateurs, you know, with the return of these veteran X-Division guys.
Now, while we were on Impact, we saw 2 title matches, both of them for the GFW belts. One was for the Global Force Wrestling Women's Championship. I had became a fan in the last couple of weeks of former GFW Women's Champion Christina Von Eerie, as she would take on Sienna with her cousin KM, but Sienna was able to pull out the victory against CVE. You know, we saw Sienna get a face-to-face with Karen Jarrett both before and after the match. It's a feud that I'm kind of, yeah, okay, it's happening. I get why it's happening, but I really don't care that it's happening, but it has to happen kind of thing. What are your thoughts? Where do where does the GFW Women's Championship go? Is now Sienna on a collision course with Rosemary to unite those two titles?
I actually think that the ending of that match and that title change was dull. Like, let's say, okay, so where does Sienna go from here? Could she be able to hang with the craziness of Rosemary, like, let's say, a Christina Von Eerie can potentially be?
Well, another thing with that, once again, you got two bad people lining up against one another. They built Rosemary as this creepy, scary, weird kind of woman that's not well liked. And, Sienna is, for lack of a better term, a bitch. So now you got bad against worse. They gotta insert a third person in there if those two wind up meeting, or there's gotta be a go-between.
Right.
And with Crazy Steve leaving for NXT, Rosemary loses one of the guys that was in her stable. Abyss is still Abyss, but she also lost somebody there. Is the writing on the wall that Rosemary's 7-8 month title reign is over, maybe even as early as Slammiversary?
I think since Sienna is in an angle with Karen Jarrett, yeah, maybe she's going to lose the title by virtue of, okay, Karen Jarrett, who else have you got? And maybe a surprise appearance in the near future, but I think, yeah, it's going to be the end of Rosemary's reign.
I'm glad you brought up that surprise appearance, because that is something we could really see is a surprise person come in. Karen Jarrett brings somebody, maybe a Gail Kim, and she gets the rub from Karen Jarrett as a face. She beats Sienna, then goes on and beats Rosemary, unifies the titles. We still have the natural good versus bad thing in each match, and it builds up whoever she brings in as somebody that's on par and not just another pretty face in the ring. Speaking of pretty faces in the ring, Ethan Carter III was in a squash match with John Bolin. Looks like he's on a collision course with the Impact Championship. Magnus defeated Matt Morgan to retain his Global Force World Championship. He's on a collision course. Matt Morgan looked really strong. Maybe he's still in the picture. Alberto El Patron beat Eli Drake with Tyrus to remain the number one contender for Magnus in his GFW Heavyweight Championship. I think maybe Eli Drake, maybe not so much, but you can't count, the man with 3 syllables in his name out. So before we get to the number one contendership match and the GFW Championship match, which didn't go on last, we're looking forward to Slammiversary. Bobby Lashley is the Impact World Champion. I just mentioned 5 names that could challenge him. Who's more likely, or do we see a multiple man match for the Impact Championship?
Well, because El Patron is still owed the championship match, given how he just surrendered the title and he hasn't gotten his fair rematch for that. And as for Magnus, yeah, he's another big guy to put in there, so maybe a triple threat match. And EC3, creating a streak of his own first before he eventually has title on his waist again.
So, what are you saying here? That they're going to let EC3 just keep getting jobbed? Or keep beating jobbers and eventually just build up another streak and kind of, hey, you're not there yet, you're not there yet, you're not there yet. Bruce Pritchard keep coming out and telling him, win one more, win one more, win one more, win one more, before he finally gets it at maybe a pay-per-view somewhere else down the line. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, some sort of like that. Since Bruce Pritchard already said that, try to find the EC3 that got lost. So, what was EC3 back then? He was beating all these jobbers, then this middle card names, building up this streak, eventually getting the title around his waist. So, maybe that's what has to happen right now. But the only difference is, Bruce Pritchard throws in the names rather than Dixie Carter spoiling her nephew and giving her nephew easy matches.
I like where you're going with that, and I think what we could see is maybe a path to redemption for EC3. Back where he becomes a good guy, because you can have him come out here and, yeah, say he beats up jobbers for the next, 4 or 5 weeks, all the way through Slammiversary. Maybe he even beats a jobber at Slammiversary. And then, he comes out, cuts a promo, I want the world title, I want it now, I want it now. Pritchard comes out and goes, the talent you've beaten in the last X amount of months is not good, so you got to beat the next class. and he beats up another class, and he beats up another class, and he keeps knocking down everything Pritchard puts in front of him before finally Ethan Carter III says, all right, I've done everything, and I'm going to kick your ass until I get Lashley. Then Lashley comes out to defend Pritchard, and EC3 and Lashley, or EC3 and El Patron, or EC3 and somebody else for the title. I think that is a hell of a way to go, because it makes EC3 legit once again. And if Bruce Pritchard's going to be the on-air voice of the whatever they're going to call themselves that are in charge of Impact, if he's going to be the on-air voice, he needs to choose a side, and I think that would be perfect for him to do right there. But let's move on. We had a World Championship match that was not in the main event, and that was Magnus defeating Matt Morgan. The Blueprint fell, although looked ridiculously strong, against Magnus. What were your thoughts on that World Championship match?
Well, the match itself was good, but to be honest with you, on the onset, I already know that Magnus is going over, since he's the better matchup for El Patron, given that just physically, just by looking at it, Matt Morgan is more of like the enforcer image rather than, the face of the company holding the company's top title.
I don't see Matt Morgan as somebody that can really be that guy that can take Impact where it wants to go, and they want to kind of bring legitimacy to the GFW, it being featured prominently on Impact Television. So I think we're going to see something fantastic between Magnus and El Patron, and then eventually the winner of that between him and Bobby Lashley, or him and the Impact title holder after Slammiversary, to reunite those belts. Speaking of El Patron, he took on Eli Drake and beat him to remain number one contender. That match went on last. It would have been the match of the night for any other night that didn't feature Matt Sydal and Eddie Edwards becoming an instant classic. El Patron is definitely headed to face Magnus next week. The winner of that match looks to be going to see Bobby Lashley at Slammiversary. So El Patron and Magnus next week. Who you got?
I'm going with, since Magnus still has the GFW World Championship, I'm going with El Patron by virtue. Oh, is that for the title? Is that for the GFW title?
It is for the
Magnus.
It is for the GFW title, and they haven't announced it, but I am more than willing to bet the winner of that match will take on Bobby Lashley at Slammiversary. That hasn't been announced, but I would say that it is gonna happen. So, Alberto El Patron and Magnus, who you got?
I'm going with Magnus by virtue of El Patron can also be the one to face Lashley, but by virtue of scheduling, because I think El Patron has more commitments outside. You know how TNA, it's not an issue with TNA if their talent gets indie bookings. So, but just by virtue of schedule, maybe I'm having Magnus for Lashley.
Well, whatever happens, I don't think it's over. I'm going to take Magnus next week so Magnus can take on Lashley. Lashley is definitely more physically imposing and doesn't need any help, but you're going to see El Patron interfere in that match at Slammiversary. You're going to see him take out Magnus, maybe even take out Lashley as well. To prove El Patron is a viable threat to Lashley, you're going to see him hit him. To prove that he's better than Magnus, you're going to see him cost Magnus the championship. El Patron is still going to be a big player. It'll give Magnus a shot at El Patron. It'll give El Patron a shot at Lashley. It'll keep the Magnus-El Patron thing going on. It'll keep Lashley in position to where he still looks strong because it took two guys to take him on in a match, and he still won and kept the title. I think those are the three you're going to see, with all due respect to your Matt Morgan and Ethan Carter and Eli Drake. I think that's going to be what you're going to wind up seeing.
I agree. I like your idea better than mine.
All right, well, that brings us to the midway point of the show, and this is where we are going to say adios to the muscle of the podcast, the one, the only, the Jaime. Jaime, you recently changed your Twitter account. Tell them where they can find you on Twitter.
The Jaime Luis thing did not work out for me, so you can find me at The Great JLA.
There you go, The Great JLA at Twitter.com. You can also find him at RealSport101.com, covering a multitude of subjects. Jaime, thank you for coming aboard, and we will see you next week. As for the rest of you listeners, stay tuned. Here in about 15 seconds, I will be bringing on the real Danny D, as we will have our encounter, as he will try to convert me to being an indie wrestling watcher, and I can tell you right now, he's fighting an uphill battle. So ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We will be right back. And as always, if you're not down with Jaime, he's got 2 words for you.
Keep listening.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sticking with us. As always, this podcast is brought to you by RealSport101.com. No ads, just sport, covering everything from esports, that's your gaming venues, all the way through football, soccer, and everything else. If it's a sport or just about a sport, you can find coverage at RealSport101.com. Now, this has been building for several weeks. An independent arbitrator has ruled that the real Danny D can get his job back on the Caps Locks and Chair Shots podcast, but first, we had to get this all out in the open and off of our chest. This is what everybody has been looking forward to. With us now, the real Danny D. Say hello to the people, Dan.
Let's refer to me as the real Zack Sabre Jr. fan. Let's make this official.
And so it begins. Well, first things first, before we get into how much of a mark you are for anybody that can fly around the ring and put themselves on YouTube, let's bring out something that is very near and dear to my heart. Billy Corgan has recently purchased all the trademarks, the ring name, and the world title for the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance. I personally think he should go and make this a rival promotion to the likes of Impact and possibly even grow it to maybe give the WWE a run for its money. However, it looks as though we could be seeing a revival of an indie promotion that could gain some steam and eventually become a major league. Dan, you know where my loyalties lie as far as the NWA goes, but you also know the hatred I have for everything that is independent wrestling. Where do you see...
to have a TV deal so bad it's not funny.
Absolutely. Especially if you can get on a network that's maybe just a little bit bigger than Pop TV, because I think the rivalry between Jeff Jarrett and Billy Corgan would be something tremendous. Where is the NWA going?
It is going to be great. The NWA will be the 3rd largest promotion that has a TV deal, behind WWE and ROH.
Whoa. Where's the love for Impact? You and I both cover Impact. I mean...
Impact will be 4th. Impact will eventually fall behind NWA. And the reason why is because of the hatred that the company has earned through this lawsuit with the Hardys. Man, you and I both know the amount of love that you and I have for Impact, for what we do for Real Sport 101. Which, yes, unfortunately, due to other commitments and other stuff that I have going on, I have unfortunately not been able to keep up with our power rankings, which we'll be getting together again this week, and this will be an accumulative power ranking, so what you see coming will be from the past week from where I left off. So this is the week you want to get back in tune with the power rankings, and we will have from 1 to 10, and it will be the best power rankings out there for Impact Wrestling.
Well, that's because you and I both share a common goal as Ethan Carter III and everybody else tries to make Impact great. We're going to do our best to make the coverage of Impact great as well. Power rankings aside, NWA aside, I'm going to give you the floor until I get tired of hearing you. Convince me why I should give a damn about anybody that isn't in Impact or the WWE.
The reason why is because we have guys out there, Tyler Black, Kevin Steen, El Generico, CM Punk. Some of the greatest wrestlers have came from these independent promotions. Yes, do not get me wrong, some of the greatest wrestlers are homegrown as well. But Claudio Cesaro, he is not under the bar. He is the bar.
Oh,
no raising it. Him and Sheamus, they're raising the bar. These guys have came from independent wrestling from all over the world. You have guys like Kenny Omega, who just recently turned down a WWE deal. We have Nick Jackson, Matt Jackson, the elite.
Okay,
and
enough.
Let's not forget guys like Zack Sabre Jr., who is the true submission specialist.
You know what? I'm not going to lie to you. When you started naming names, I completely zoned out. I got the Oilers and the Ducks going on. It's 7-1 right now, and I may have just watched somebody get murdered. Beside the point, that's how little I care for the independent scene. Yes, you have Kevin Owens and all of these guys that got started
Kevin Steen, refer to him as his proper name.
Yeah, okay. You have all these guys that got started. But the way I look at it, it's like this. With the exception of maybe 5 total Hall of Famers going back to the 1800s, nobody came straight to the major leagues and is in the Hall of Fame. All of these guys had to start somewhere. Nobody just goes straight from high school graduation to Monday Night Raw. They have to start somewhere. So yeah, Tyler Black got started in the Ring of Honor. Yes, CM Punk made his career doing indie shows in Chicago, wrestling his best friend, Colt Cabana, and Justin Roberts was there. I just saw that DVD, by the way. Fantastic stuff on Punk, even though it was WWE produced. But yeah, it was great. It was fine. Whatever. Chris Hero is a god, I'm sure. Being a god in independent wrestling is like holding the career home run record for the minor leagues. Yeah, it's something that may get you a beer in a certain town somewhere, but in the end, can you tell me who's the leading home run hitter in the minor leagues? No, nobody can. Can you tell me who's the leading goal scorer in the ECHL career? No, nobody can. The same way, I guarantee you pull 7 out of 10 normal Joes on the street that can say they've ever watched wrestling, and they can't tell you who the Ring of Honor wrestling champion is, or who's wrestling the main event at Rev Pro coming up that's real soon here in May, and yes, I paid attention. Or who's going to be at this next indie show in Hoboken, New Jersey, wrestling some guy that was big in the 1970s. Or who Tony Atlas is going to take on at the Moundsville National Guard Armory next week. Nobody gives a damn, because the indies are the minor leagues. They're a great thing to watch on a Saturday night when you got nothing better to do, but in the end, they're crap, and they're always going to be crap. So that was failed attempt number 1. Now, here's your redeeming opportunity. I hear you marks talk all this stuff about Zack Sabre Jr. and about Pentagon Jr. or the 5th or the 3rd or whatever the hell he is. Why should I pay attention to him? Why should I give a damn who Zack Sabre or Sabre or Sabo or Sabu or who the hell they are? Why should I care?
First reason why I should care about Zack Sabre Jr. is because, for one, you can go on the WWE Network and watch this guy work in the ring. He turned down the WWE contract. If he doesn't turn down that contract, he has that Cruiserweight Championship. He has it. There's no way they give it to anybody else. That guy is one of the most talented guys out there. I watch WWE for the storylines. I watch WWE for the development and the storylines, and I watch it to watch these guys work in the ring. And it's where I can get my weekly fix 2 nights a week for 5 hours a week. When I want to watch real technical wrestling and I want to watch guys do standing moonsaults, do triple moonsaults, do a whole bunch of crazy shit in the ring, I go to FlowSlam.tv and I watch them work. I watch guys like Keith Lee. This guy is 320 pounds. He does a Harry Sunacina over the top rope like anybody you will see in the Cruiserweight division. He can outwork most of the guys in that ring. You will see these guys in these independent circuits on TV. Whether it is on ROH, whether it is on TNA, whether it is on WWE eventually, we're going to see these guys. The reason why you should care is because you should want to see some of the best technical wrestling in the world today outside of the WWE. Because unfortunately, you don't see moves like the Brain Buster and a Tombstone Piledriver anymore. Because they try to be safe because of lawsuits. I want to see the best work. I don't just want to see good... I want to see the best work in the ring. I like good storylines, but I also want to see good wrestling.
Okay, well, to what you said, if I want to watch a, glorified stuntman, I'll watch Die Hard. I'll watch Indiana Jones. I'll watch The Matrix even. But I'm sorry, I don't put any stock in a fat man leaping off the top rope. Because it just doesn't make any sense. You have all these...
Fat man? I am a fat man. Keith Lee is not a fat man. He is an athletic machine.
How big is he?
No, 320, like probably a solid 12 to 15% body fat at most.
Still. I'm sorry. I mean, it doesn't interest me. If I want to watch glorified stuntmen do crazy stuff, I'll watch a movie. I'll watch a TV show. I'll watch a YouTube backyard wrestling crap that Bino Machino we're thinking about you, buddy. I'll watch some of the stuff he used to do, but other than that, I mean, no. It's most of them shows are badly lit in rings where the ropes look like they were strung together with the strength of a 4-year-old.
That is your 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000 independent shows.
It's the
What you have
same
now-
thing. You watch the shows that
so
CM,
based off-
the Summer of Punk. Watch the Summer of Punk. 90% of those shows were garbage. You watch anything that, it seems like any video I have ever found on Cassius Ohno, okay, before he was the real KO, was terrible. It was a god-awful mess. The stuff, any early videos you find of Daniel Bryan, terrible. And that was only a few years ago. I'm sorry.
No.
Indie wrestling's garbage, and it'll always be garbage.
It's garbage. Why are the top names in the WWE indie wrestlers?
Because everybody has to start somewhere. And the top name in the WWE was never an indie wrestler. I'm sorry. In fact, the top 2 names in the WWE were never indie wrestlers.
The top 2 names in the WWE today are not indie wrestlers.
Damn right. The first one is the man that's the flag bearer for the WWE for about the last 15 years.
Get his ass off of there. He's filming a movie.
Ba-da-da-da-da. You can't even see him right now. And the second one...
Exactly.
The second one...
That's because he's too busy doing a publicity stunt for proposing to Nikki Bella in the ring.
I don't care. He's still the biggest name in the WWE. And the second biggest name in the WWE is the one in 21... Well, I guess it's 23 or 22 and 2 now, but he was the one in 21 and 1. He is the Beast Incarnate. He is Brock Lesnar, and he was never, ever an independent wrestler.
That's not where I was expecting you to go. I was expecting you to go with Roman there. I was expecting a Roman.
Well, Roman's kind of fallen from my good graces. I mean, you can't have Superman get destroyed 2 weeks in a row by the Incredible Hulk and have it believable.
Can't have Superman get destroyed by the Incredible Hulk, and then they take a picture together. Overseas.
I mean, I guess, when in Rome, do what Roman does, but God, that was a huge break in kayfabe. Good job, Titus, on that.
Yeah, it was great. That was one of the things I was just like, oh man, kayfabe's not dead. Wait a second. Wait, is kayfabe dead?
Yeah, it's deader than a door handle. Not to mention, other big Titus news. Apparently, he kicked the camera out of a cameraman and broke his hand and wrist. Shawn Michaels would be proud.
He would. I mean, I'm sure Titus can't throw a super kick as well as the Young Bucks, but he might be able to throw an up kick that well.
The Young Bucks. Now, tell me about these Young Buck people. Why should I care about them?
Because they're just too sweet.
So they're ripping off the Clique. They're ripping off the NWO. Continue, please. Because so far, 0 for 1.
Are they really ripping off of the NWO if Scott Hall's son was part of the Bullet Club until he got injured?
How does that have any effect on the Young Bucks?
Considering they're the Bullet Club.
Okay.
Too Sweet originated with the Clique, which did originate in the WWE.
Thank you.
Which I will admit, but I will also say that it has became revived thanks to the Club and the Bullet Club. I mean...
No. The Clique died when the NWO died in April of 2002 when Hulk Hogan became a good guy and Kevin Nash tore up his quads again and Scott Hall climbed into a whiskey bottle. That was when the Clique, Too Sweet, the NWO, that's when it all just died. And it should have stayed dead. Nobody else should be doing that Too Sweet thing that's over. That's done with.
And I've been Too Sweeting people for years, dude. I know you have too.
Exactly. But it should be dead in the ring. That would be like somebody coming out and calling people brother, or somebody ripping off the Macho Man, or Cactus Jack, or Dude Love. Like, are we gonna see Noelle Foley, who's getting trained at the Performance Center in Florida? Are we gonna see her come out and go bang bang like her dad does? No, it'd be terrible. I even think some of the stuff that Charlotte's doing, that her dad does is terrible. I like the fact she's got a figure 8 instead of a figure 4, but it's terrible. Indies are ripping off the main stuff they see because people, oh wow, they're doing that. Well, they must be associated with that because the indies are a bunch of marked wannabe stuntmen who don't know anything about wrestling except what they've seen on TV and try to rip it off.
That's what we all know.
I'm just saying.
That's what we all know.
That's why the indies are terrible. That's exactly why the indies are terrible. Because they're not original.
See the purest wrestling in independent circuits. This is what I've been trying to get through your thick skull.
The purest wrestling.
You're going to see the purest wrestling, the purest technical wrestling, the best wrestling you can find. You will find not in a VFW hall, not in a bingo hall. You're going to find it at Orlando Live Events, WrestleMania weekend, where you're going to see guys like Drew Galloway. You're going to see guys like Zack Sabre Jr.
His name is Drew McIntyre.
His name is Drew Galloway.
McIntyre, continue.
Leo Rush. All Ego Ethan Page. You are going to see these guys give you the best wrestling matches out there. They're not going to give you the best storylines. I will be the first to admit, independent wrestling does not have the best storylines. Half those guys cannot work the mic as well as anybody in the WWE. But they're going to give me the best action in the ring.
And see,
if you want...
that's the problem. Because, and this is how I'm kind of a walking contradiction. My heart has always been with the old school NWA. The 70s, the 80s, up until Jim Crockett Promotions pretty much bought the NWA and it became WCW. The great thing about that was when Ric Flair was touring the country with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and they were doing 60-minute matches all over the country and beating up local talent for the NWA. The thing that sets them apart from the indie wrestlers now is the fact that you could watch them at every show everywhere and be entertained 100% of the time. You can't do that with the indies nowadays. I can't go to a show, an MCW show, shout out to your school. I can't go to an MCW show in Boston and care about anything unless I'm there watching the in-ring action. I'm not invested in any storyline. I'm not invested in anything else. But you go back to some of the tapings, even some of the AWA stuff that was on ESPN that you can still even catch sometimes on ESPN Classic. You go to some of that stuff and you can turn it on, and it doesn't matter if it's an episode from April 1981 or December 88 or January 78. You can go back and you can be invested in that storyline by just watching one episode. You can't do that with the indies nowadays. You can't do that with anything nowadays. That's what separates it. That's why I can love the NWA and hate independent wrestling nowadays.
I don't disagree with you on that fact, but what I want you to get, and what I just want you to watch, man, is I just want you to see some of these matches. Like some of these matches, you won't see stuff like this anywhere on TV anymore, unless you're watching an ROH. You won't even see it on Impact. Like the guys on Impact are great. The guys on WWE are great. You and I both know that I am a huge WWE mark, but just as much as I'm a WWE mark, I'm an indie mark just because of what these guys do, and they do it for the love of the business. They do it for the fans.
That's because guys nobody watches them and there's no money in it.
Well, no, that's where you're wrong. That's where you're 100% wrong. You got guys like the Young Bucks that'll go out there and literally almost put their lives on the line, but they make hella merch money. They make more merch money than guys in the guys that are in the Cruiserweight division, 205 Live. They make more money than some of the guys on NXT. Just in merch money.
And you know what?
You got small guys out there like Leo Rush I hope Leo never signs with the WWE if they offer him a 205 Live contract. Because I would rather see him guys wrestle guys like McIntyre, guys like Ono, who he's done matches with, I believe. I'd rather see him wrestle guys like that and just go pound for pound and tit for tat with them because of the in-ring work that he does. And I don't want to see him get pushed into that 205 Live division because that division is shit right now. There are guys that are in that division that I would almost guarantee you, if it wasn't for the signature on that paycheck, they'd rather be out working the indies again and making their merch money rather than making their paychecks.
And this is where I've defended this numerous times. You can bring up the fact that the indie guys are making more merch money than everything else, and okay, great. If they are, they are. Good on them. But look at it like this. You have a bench warmer in the Premier League. Let's say, and I have no idea if these figures are anywhere close to accurate, but let's say he makes $500,000 a season, okay? But he still plays for Manchester United, okay? But you have a guy in maybe the second tier league, whatever that may be in Britain. He's the star of that for that team. He makes $1 million. So he actually makes more than somebody in the English Premier League, and he probably deserves it. He's probably a better player. However, he's still a big fish in a small pond. And a lot of these guys are whales and teardrops in the WWE. You take somebody who you haven't seen on television in months, or somebody that's a jobber. R-Truth. Perfect example. You take R-Truth, and he is a comedic joke on Monday Night Raw. He's got a tag team title match with Goldust on Monday Night Raw against, I think it's the Hardy Boys, coming up Monday. They're going to get lambasted. It's going to be a joke. You're going to see R-Truth probably do a little breakdancing in the ring. Goldust might suck his teeth and try to bite Jeff Hardy, but in the end, the Hardys are going to win, and it's going to be an okay to maybe decent match. Say Tuesday, he gets terminated from the WWE. He shows up at a Ring of Honor taping on Wednesday. Guaranteed he is a world champion. Goldust, the same way. Titus O'Neil, world champion anywhere else but the WWE. It comes down to this. Would you rather be a minor player on a world championship roster or a star on a team that gets booted in the first round of the playoffs? That's the choice these guys are making. And I really can't fault them either way. Stars get paid. People come out to watch stars. You know,
you just proved my point.
You look at Buffalo.
It doesn't
Jack Eichel. Jack Eichel is a star in Buffalo. He's going to be a star in Buffalo for several years. But it's going to eat him alive that he's not the best. It's going to eat him alive that he's not at least with the best. So for everything that Jack Eichel has done, great. He's never going to win a world title with Buffalo. Look at Dan Marino. Dan Marino is another perfect example. Dan Marino was really good on a terrible team. You put him on any other team from 1980 to maybe 1990, he's going to win a Super Bowl. He's going to win multiple Super Bowls. And this is where these indie guys are at. They can either make a little bit of money, but be at the ceiling of the indie class. Be known by maybe 40% of wrestling fans, or they can go to the WWE. They can sign that contract, maybe take a little bit of a pay cut, but be on Monday Night Raw, where somebody who turns into the nationally syndicated Ring of Honor at 1 a.m. on a Saturday morning, that maybe 50,000 people nationwide total will see them work a 5-minute extremely edited match in Ring of Honor, or they can go to Monday Night Raw and be featured for 2 minutes for 4 million people. You want to look at me straight in the face and tell me there isn't something more than money going on why the Young Bucks and Zack Sabre Jr. and Pentagon and whoever else turned down a nationally televised deal with the WWE? I say it's bullshit. And I say every indie wrestler that is not looking to sign a contract in Stamford, Connecticut today is full of shit. Anybody that has never been on the stage...
I don't think you'll find an indie wrestler that'll say that they don't want to make it, to the WWE. But what you will find indie wrestlers saying nowadays is if they don't make it to the WWE and they can make merch money and they can get their booking fees right, they will be content with doing what they love. Because you know what I'm doing. You know I go to school. You won't find me ever saying that, oh, yeah, man, I'd love to just wrestle, I'd love to just travel the world, wrestle WCPW, World Culture Pro Wrestling, or wrestle Rev Pro, wrestle OTT over in Ireland, wrestle MCW here, wrestle all these huge, wrestle PWG. You won't find me saying, oh, yeah, that's all I want to do. That's all I want to do. Yeah, absolutely. That's where I want to be. I want to be Monday Night Raw, Tuesday Night SmackDown, NXT. Obviously, I'll never be 205 Live, but...
Hey, gastric bypass is a real thing. We saw Al Roker lose a person and a half. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Hell, Crash Holly was well over 400 pounds. I'm just saying scales can be altered. Continue with what you're saying.
I'm just saying, I don't think you'll find an independent wrestler that'll say, unless you're going overseas, unless you're going to a Japan. Yes, some of those guys, their goal in this business might be to make it to New Japan, and that's it. But that's because it's a completely different culture. You're not going to find an independent wrestler in the States to say that that's not what their main goal is to make it to the main stage. Because that's what it is. It is the main stage. I'll agree with you 100% on that. But what I will tell you is guys like the Young Bucks, if they never sign with the WWE, in a way, you can't fault them for the amount of money they make off merch and the amount of money they make on their booking fees.
Oh, no.
You can't fault them.
I'm not faulting them for anything. I'm just saying they're stupid for turning down a contract coming from Connecticut. Because if I'm sorry, I don't care what you're doing. No little kid has ever been in his backyard with his little brother or jumped off the top of his bunk bed onto his brother's mattress that was sitting on the floor, dropping an elbow and said, I just want to be like Zack Sabre Jr. Nobody's ever said that. It's, I want to be like the Macho Man. I want to be like Shawn Michaels. I want to stun somebody like Steve Austin. I want to give somebody the rock bottom like Dwayne. Nobody has ever said they want to be this independent wrestler. They said, I want to be this WWE wrestler. Nobody's ever practiced any special move.
Independent guys out there. Evolve Zone. All Ego Ethan Page, man. Like, one of my favorite heels out there right now. That's not mainstream. All Ego Ethan Page. That dude can work the mic. That dude can do anything that some of those guys that get the paycheck from Stanford can do.
I'm not doubting skill sets here.
His finish is a Dwayne slam. What do you think it is? Just based off of that?
It's a rock bottom, obviously.
100%. I mean, these guys are just as big as marks as you and I are.
Right, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. All I'm saying is anybody that turns down the opportunity to go work for Vince McMahon is a damned fool. It is the big leagues, because you may be the greatest professional wrestler in the history of professional wrestling. You may be able to wrestle like Ric Flair and Steamboat and Austin and Michaels and Bret Hart, and you may be the best there is, was, and ever will be, and that's great. But unless you go to Stanford, and unless you get that TV time, unless you get that spot at a SummerSlam, at a WrestleMania, at the Royal Rumble, on Monday Night Raw, on SmackDown, nobody's going to know who the hell you are. Even if you are jobbing for 5 minutes, even if you have a 5-minute squash match against somebody like Braun Strowman, at least then you've been on TV. If you're wrestling a PWG show or an XFMPRCXW show, nobody's going to know who the hell you are. Yeah, there may be some guys that used to trade tapes back in the 80s who now trade links on YouTube. They might know who you are. Dave Meltzer might know who you are. But the average wrestling fan's not going to know who you are. But if you go to Stanford and you go and you're on an NXT show, a hell of a lot more people are going to know you. If you're on a Monday Night Raw, even if you lose, people are going to know who you are. You know who else started out as a jobber on Monday Night Raw? Both the Hardy Boys. Pretty much everybody that has been a star in the last 20 years outside of John Cena started out as a jobber in the WWE, and they made their way. That's the entrant. And anybody, any independent wrestler worth his weight in salt that sits there and turns down a WWE contract, no matter how much money they're making on merchandise, on booking fees, on anything else that they have, if they are turning down a contract coming from Vincent Kennedy McMahon with his signature or Paul Levesque's signature on that bottom line, and they are turning that shit down, they're an idiot. If they choose to stay in independent wrestling and not go to Stanford or not go to the Performance Center, not go to NXT, not travel the world with a WWE or even Impact, they're dumb. And that's somebody I don't want to watch. That's somebody I don't care to watch.
You have a child. Let's say you were a professional wrestler, right? You can stay at home Monday through Thursday. You leave Friday.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get that with the WWE. But you live comfortably enough off your merch sales, your booking fees, to where you and your family live comfortably and you have enough money to take your family on 10 vacations a year if you want to. You have more than enough money. you have more than enough money than you would ever need in your lifetime at this point in your life, right? You already have your plans out. You're opening up a school of your own when you're done. You can bring in big names. You know you'll be able to bring in big name stars to run one-day seminars and shit like that, right?
Okay.
Would you rather stay home and watch your child grow up, or would you rather travel the world?
See, this is where you knowing me is playing a huge part into this hypothetical situation.
Because that's part of the reason why the Bucks didn't sign.
Okay, and I'm telling you what, the Bucks, to get where they're at, had to make their entire career, their entire life about wrestling. They had to make everything they have ever done since the time they could breathe about wrestling. So I don't care what they say on Twitter, and until I see a contract or a video of them ripping up a contract on WWE letterhead, I'm not going to believe it. But anybody that has made their entire adult life about one solid thing, anybody that has dreamed of ever headlining a WrestleMania, and then they get that opportunity and say, no, I just want to be with my family, they're lying.
No, I don't disagree.
Because, I
don't disagree to an extent.
I love my children to death. I really do. But if Vince McMahon called me tomorrow and said, hey, you're going to Arizona, you're covering the next WrestleMania, you're going to be a featured writer on WWE.com, we're going to put you on the network, you're going to anchor a show. Like I said, I love my kids, but I might be packing my bags to move to Connecticut, because that's anybody that has the opportunity to fulfill a lifelong dream, something that they used to sit or lay in their beds with their eyes closed and picture the bright lights and the bulbs flashing around them as they are in the center stage. They would do it. And I'm sorry, until I see them rip up the WWE contract they were supposedly offered, I ain't gonna believe it. But Dan, as exciting as this conversation is, we are gonna have to put a pin in it and keep it till next time. It's been a great time here having you back, Dan. You're gonna be back on the regular show as we'll have it up on Friday, correct?
Correct.
Alrighty, now where can the people find you on Twitter? Update them on what you're doing for our website. Give a little view into what it's like to be the real Danny D.
You can find me at Real D Direct on Twitter. That's DDORRETT. That's Real D Direct on Twitter. We're going to get back to writing this week. We've had some pretty hectic weeks here since WrestleMania. Catching up on some real life stuff. You know, real life does get in the way every once in a while from hobbies and from other things that we all like to do. So we're going to be catching back up. We're going to get them Impact Power Rankings back and going again this week. If you guys are in the MLB, be expecting some huge MLB articles from me. We're going to be having some betting articles coming out here this week. So far this year in the AL East only, I am sitting at 57-10 on games that I decide to choose. That is 57 wins and 10 losses. Just so you guys know, coming from the Baltimore
fixing
area,
games. He's fixing games. He's fixing games. Oh, sorry, I had something in my throat.
You know, we went 2 for 3 on a parlay today. Just to let you guys know, we took Milwaukee, we took Miami. We lost on Texas. They blew that lead in the 7th. Right now, haven't checked the game, but we do have the Spurs. We do have the Spurs today, straight up on the money line. I was expecting them to go one more up on the Rockets on the NBA front. So we're going to be having some big things coming MLB, some big things coming in the wrestling articles. And
well, bud, I got some bad news for you. At halftime, the Rockets are up by 4, 57-53.
That's fine. I'll take Kawhi. Give me Kawhi -4 going into the second half. We're going to be looking good. Unfortunately, James Harden isn't going to be saucing on anybody tonight. So,
alrighty. Well, I'll tell you what, Dan, it's been a blast having you back on the podcast. We look to having you back again on Friday. Just to give you guys a little heads up about what's going on in my neck of the woods, I have recently picked up some slack on the MLB page for RealSport101.com. I am also doing all 3 recaps, that is Raw, SmackDown, and Impact, and I write some of those lesser-known stories you may not have heard around the wrestling world. So for all of us here at the Caps, Locks, and Chair Shots podcast, and we'd like to thank the 10 or 15 of you that do subscribe to us daily, we just have one thing to say. If you're not down with the Caps, Locks, and Chair Shots podcast, we only got 2 words for you. Keep listening.